Hey guys, tonight we begin with a journey not of kings or knights in shining armor, but of the mud, the sweat, and the quiet desperation that formed the bedrock of their world. We're stepping back into the 14th century, into the life of someone whose name was never written down, whose choices were few, and whose world was often no larger than the distance a person could walk in a day. We're going to explore the raw, unvarnished, and often brutal reality of being a serf in medieval England, a life bound to the soil and to a lord you might never see. This isn't a story of grand battles, but of the daily war against starvation, disease, and exhaustion. It's a story of profound faith and crushing superstition, of community and confinement. We will feel the chill of the wattle and daub hut, smell the wood smoke and the livestock, and hear the relentless rhythm of the seasons that dictated every moment of existence. We're going to understand not just what these people did, but who they were, and how they endured a world that demanded everything from them and promised very little in return. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Music swells slightly, then fades to a very low, ambient hum. Imagine the darkness. Not the modern darkness, punctuated by streetlights and the glow of screens, but a total, profound blackness. This is your world for nearly half of your life. It lives inside your small, one-room hut, thick and almost tangible. The only thing that pierces it is the sliver of grey light forcing its way through the smoke hole in the thatched roof or the unglazed window slit, sealed against the night with a piece of wooden shutter or a bundle of rags. You are not waking up from a restful slumber in a soft bed. You are stirring on a straw-stuffed mattress on the floor, a scratchy wool blanket your only shield against the persistent damp that seeps up from the packed earth floor. The air is thick with the smell of sleep, stale wood smoke, and something else, the warm, musty scent of your family's most valuable possessions, the ox and a couple of chickens, who shared this single room with you through the cold night. They are your walking, breathing insurance policy against total ruin. Your name is, for the sake of this journey, Thomas. Or William. Or perhaps John. Your name is common, like the soil you work. It doesn't matter much. What matters is your title, inativus. The born one. A serf. You belong to this land. Or more accurately, you belong to the lord of the manor, just like the trees in his forest and the deer he hunts. You are not a slave, not quite. You cannot be sold away from your land. But you cannot leave it, either. This patch of earth, this village of Wexbury, is your entire world, a prison without walls. The first true light of dawn is your signal. There is no concept of waking up slowly. To be idle when the sun is up is to be wasteful, and waste is a sin that nature, and your Lord, will punish severely. Your wife is already moving in the half-light, stoking the embers of last night's fire back to life in the central hearth. The smoke, for a few moments, is blinding. It stings your eyes and catches in your throat before finding its lazy way up to the hole in the roof. There is a reason the beams above are black and glossy with soot. Everything you own is coated in a thin film of it. Breakfast is not a meal, it is fuel. It is pottage. It was pottage yesterday, and it will be pottage tomorrow. A thick, greyish gruel of boiled grains, oats, barley, maybe some peas or beans if the season has been kind. It simmers perpetually in a single iron pot over the fire. Your wife scoops it into rough wooden bowls. You eat it with a spoon carved from horn, or perhaps just a piece of hardened bread to scoop it up. The bread is a dark, heavy loaf made from rye and barley flour, called marslin. It's gritty, and you sometimes find tiny fragments of the millstone in it. You chew carefully. A broken tooth is not an inconvenience, it is a slow-burning disaster, a future of agony and infection with no cure. You don't talk much. What is there to say? The day ahead is known to you. It is etched into your muscles, dictated by the season. If it is spring, it is the back-breaking work of plowing. You will guide the heavy, clumsy wooden plow, pulled by your precious ox and perhaps a neighbor's, through the wet, heavy clay of your strip of land in the village's open field. Your world is communal by necessity. The great fields are not fenced off into neat private squares. They are vast expanses, divided into dozens of long, narrow strips. You have a strip here, a strip there, scattered across the landscape. It's a system designed for fairness, in a way, ensuring everyone gets a bit of the good soil and a bit of the bad. But in practice, it means you spend half your day just walking from one of your holdings to another. It's a kind of built-in inefficiency you are powerless to change. Imagine the physical reality of plowing. You lean your entire body weight into the plow handles, trying to keep the blade cutting a straight furrow. The ox strains, its breath misting in the cool air. Your son, barely 10 years old, walks ahead, goading the animal with a long stick. His childhood is not a time of play, it is an apprenticeship for a life of this exact labor. The earth is resistant. It fights you. By midday, your back, your shoulders, your arms, they don't ache, they burn with a deep, liquid fire. You do not stop for a lunch break. You might pause to gnaw on a piece of bread and a hunk of hard, salty cheese, washed down with small ale. The water from the local stream isn't safe. It carries the flux and other sicknesses. The ale, a weak, watery brew made by your wife, is safer because the brewing process kills the germs. Everyone drinks it, from your youngest child to the village elder. You are in a state of perpetual, low-grade intoxication. Perhaps it's for the best. It might be the only thing that dulls the edges of this life. If it is summer, the work is different, but no less relentless. The hay harvest, then the main event, the grain harvest. The entire village mobilizes. You work with a sickle, not a scythe. The scythe is faster, but it's reserved for the Lord's private land, his domain. For your own strips, you use the simple, back-bending sickle. You grab a handful of wheat stalks, slice, and repeat. Grab, slice, repeat. From sunup to sundown. The sun beats down on your neck. The wheat chaff gets into your tunic, your eyes, your throat, making you itch and cough. This work is ruled by terror. The terror of rain. A week of rain at the wrong time could ruin the entire harvest. And a ruined harvest means a winter of true, desperate hunger. Not just the dull, familiar ache of an empty stomach, but the kind of gnawing starvation that makes people boil leather to chew on. You have seen it before. You have seen neighbors grow gaunt, their eyes hollow. You have seen children become too weak to cry. So you work with a frantic energy, a prayer on your lips, your eyes constantly scanning the sky for the telltale darkening of clouds. When the sun finally begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in colors you are too tired to appreciate, you do not go home. Not yet. First, you must tend to the animals. The ox must be fed and watered, its harness checked for wear. The chickens must be secured. Only then can you trudge the long way back to your hut, your body a symphony of pain. The evening meal is the morning meal, reheated. More pottage. As darkness falls, the world shrinks again to the size of your hut, illuminated by the flickering, unsteady light of the central fire or a single tallow candle, which sputters and smells of rendered animal fat. This is the time for small tasks. You might repair a tool handle, your wife might be spinning wool into thread with a drop spindle, her hands calloused but nimble. Stories are told, but they are not grand epics. They are local gossip, Bible stories filtered through the village priest, and ancient folk tales of fairies and spirits that live in the woods and streams, beings you fear and respect in equal measure, sometimes more so than the distant God of the church. You fall into your straw bed not long after sunset. There is nothing else to do, and every moment of rest is precious currency for the next day's labor. As you lie there, listening to the soft sounds of your family sleeping and the ox shifting in the dark, you are not thinking of the future. You are not dreaming of a better life. Your conceptualization of existence is cyclical, not linear. There is this year, and the next year, and the year after that, all promising the same toil. Your only real hope is simple: to have enough food to survive the winter, to avoid sickness, and for the sun to rise again tomorrow, promising another day of the same brutal, beautiful, terrible life. This is your reality. And you are, for now, surviving it. Your life is a tapestry woven with two threads, the demands of the earth and the demands of your Lord. Of the two, the Lord's are the more arbitrary and the more infuriating. The earth is a hard master, but it is predictable. The Lord, or rather his proxy, is a different kind of force entirely. You have probably never seen the Lord of the Manor himself. He might be a powerful baron who lives in a castle dozens of leagues away, a man who owns 20 such manors and thinks of Wexbury only as a line item in a ledger, a source of income. His presence, however, is a constant, oppressive weight on your shoulders. And that weight has a face, the reeve. The reeve is a man like you, a fellow villager. He is not a knight or a nobleman. But he has been chosen, or has schemed his way into the position, to be the Lord's manager on the ground. He is the foreman, the accountant, and the enforcer, all rolled into one. He's your neighbor, but he is not your friend. His job is to squeeze every last drop of productivity and profit from the village for the Lord. His own prosperity, and perhaps even his safety, depends on it. He is a man caught in the middle, and like many men in that position, he directs the pressure he feels from above downwards onto you. Imagine it is a Tuesday. By custom, today is a work day. This means you do not work on your own scattered strips of land. You work on the Lord's domain, his private fields, which are invariably the largest, flattest, most fertile lands in the manor. This is the corvée, the labor rent you owe your Lord simply for the privilege of existing on his land. You receive no wages for this. Your payment is not being fined or beaten or thrown out of your home. You arrive at the Lord's fields with your own tools. The reeve is already there, a stout man with a perpetual scowl and a staff of office in his hand. He watches everyone. He notes who arrived late. He shouts at a man whose ploughing is not as straight as he'd like. He is the physical embodiment of the system's injustice. While you sweat and toil to grow wheat that will become fine white bread for the Lord's table, you know you will subsist on your own gritty muslin loaf. You are cultivating a prosperity you will never taste. It's a quiet, simmering resentment. You can't voice it. To complain is to be insubordinate. To refuse to work is unthinkable, it would be rebellion, and the punishment for that is swift and brutal. So you work. You keep your head down. But you watch. You and your fellow villagers have ways of fighting back, small, silent acts of sabotage that the Reeve is constantly on the lookout for. You might work a little slower when his back is turned. You might feign an injury or a broken tool. When harvesting the Lord's grain, perhaps a few extra sheaves accidentally fall into your own pile. It's a dangerous game of petty theft, a silent war of attrition fought on the battlefield of the harvest. The demands are not just for labor. They are for everything. When your daughter wishes to marry a boy from the next village, you must pay the merchant fine. Why? Because your daughter is your lord's property. Her leaving the manor is a loss of a potential laborer and childbearer for him. You are, in essence, buying her freedom to move 3 miles down the road. When your eldest son dies and you are to inherit the small tenancy that was in his name, you must pay the chariot. This is the death tax. By custom, the lord is entitled to your best beast. The Reeve will come to your hut, look over your precious ox, the one that is the key to your survival, and lead it away. There is nothing you can do. You will weep with rage and impotence, and then you will have to find a way to beg, borrow, or indenture yourself to acquire another animal before the ploughing season begins. Even justice is the Lord's property. Once a month, the manorial court is held. It might be in the small hall, or if there isn't one, in the church or even under a large oak tree. The steward, a more important official who travels between the Lord's manors, presides. But the Reeve is always there, acting as prosecutor. All the small dramas of village life are laid bare. One man accuses another of letting his pigs wander into his vegetable patch. A woman is accused of gossip. You are brought before the court because your ditch bordering the Lord's pasture has become overgrown with weeds. You stand there, cap in hand, covered in mud from the fields. The steward, clean and literate, listens to the Reeve's accusation. You have no lawyer. You speak for yourself, in your rough, local dialect. You try to explain that you were busy with the Lord's harvest, that you had no time for the ditch. It doesn't matter. It is your responsibility. You are fined. A few pence. It may as well be a fortune. You will have to sell a dozen eggs, or a chicken, to pay it. The court is not about justice as you might understand it. It is another mechanism of control and revenue. It is there to reinforce the order of things. The Lord is the master, and you are his servant. There are other, more subtle infringements. You cannot grind your own corn. You must take it to the Lord's mill and pay the miller a portion of your precious flour for the service. The millers are universally distrusted, famous for cheating everyone by taking more than their fair share, their thumbs secretly pressing on the scales. But you have no choice. You cannot bake your bread in your own hearth. You must take your dough to the Lord's communal oven and pay a fee to have it baked. You cannot fish in the stream or hunt rabbits in the woods. That is poaching, and the punishment is mutilation, a hand chopped off, perhaps, or death. The fish, the rabbits, the deer, the very trees themselves belong to the Lord. You live in a world of cannots. It's a stark contrast to the modern idea of freedom. Your life is circumscribed by a web of obligations, rules, and restrictions, all designed to channel the wealth you create with your hands upwards into the invisible coffers of a man you will never meet. The shadow of his ownership covers everything. It is in the taste of your bread, the ache in your back, and the fear you feel when you see the Reeve walking towards your hut. You endure it because there is no alternative. The concept of another way of life is as alien as the concept of the Earth revolving around the Sun. This is simply the way things are, the order God has ordained. Also, the priest tells you, "Let us return to your home." The word home might be too generous. It is a shelter, a hovel. Let's imagine its construction. The frame is rough-hewn timber, what we call a cruck frame. Two massive, curved timbers are raised to meet at a peak, forming an A. A few of these create the basic structure. The walls are not stone or brick. They are wattle and daub. A lattice of woven hazel or willow sticks, the wattle is jammed between the timbers, and then it is smeared, inside and out, with the daub, a sticky, foul-smelling mixture of clay, straw, wet mud, and animal dung. It is, in essence, a house made of mud and sticks. It has no foundations. The timber frame rests directly on the damp earth. The floor is just that, packed dirt, perhaps strewn with rushes or straw to soak up some of the moisture and mud. It's a losing battle. The damp is a constant companion. It makes your bones ache in the winter and fosters a perpetual musty smell. Step inside. The first thing you notice, after your eyes adjust from the daylight, is the gloom. The only light sources are the open doorway, a couple of small, shuttered slits that pass for windows, and the fire in the central hearth. The fire is the heart of the hovel. It provides warmth, light, and the means to cook your endless pottage. But it has no chimney. The smoke simply rises, loiters in the rafters, and finds its way out through the smoke hole in the roof, or not. The constant exposure to this smoke leaves you with a chronic cough and eyes that are perpetually red and watery. We would call it emphysema or chronic bronchitis. You just call it breathing. Look around the single, cramped room. It's maybe 15 by 20 feet. In this space live you, your wife, your 3 surviving children, you have buried 2 others, your ox, and a handful of chickens. The division between human and animal living space is, at best, a low wicker partition. At night, the gentle lowing of the ox, the clucking of the hens, the breathing and occasional whimpering of your children, this is your domestic soundscape. This proximity to livestock is not a sign of squalor, but of pragmatism. The animals are too valuable to be left outside to be stolen or killed by a wolf. And in the depths of winter, their body heat is a vital, non-wood-burning furnace that might make the difference between shivering and freezing to death. Your worldly possessions can be counted on 2 hands. There is the iron cooking pot, your most valuable single item, a treasure to be passed down through generations. A few wooden bowls and spoons. A knife. A wooden chest that holds your spare tunic, you own 2, one for everyday filth and one for Sundays, and your wife's things. A stone quern for grinding small amounts of grain by hand if you can't get to the Lord's mill. The straw-filled sacks for sleeping. And that's about it. There is no art, no decoration, save perhaps a cross woven from rushes hanging on the wall. Your world is one of utility, not aesthetics. Life is lived in public, yet is intensely private. The village is a tight-knit community, but not in a romantic, idyllic sense. It is a community born of necessity and surveillance. Everyone knows everyone else's business. They know when you quarrel with your wife, when your child is sick, when your harvest is poor. Your reputation is paramount. To be seen as lazy, dishonest, or impious can lead to ostracism, which is a slow-motion death sentence. Amidst this lack of privacy is a profound spiritual and intellectual isolation. You are illiterate. The world of letters, of ideas, of history, is completely closed to you. Your knowledge of the world beyond your village comes from two sources: the occasional traveling peddler or pilgrim, and the parish priest. The priest is a central figure in your life. He is likely a peasant's son himself, perhaps the only person in the village who can read and write. He christens you, marries you, and will eventually bury you. His church, a simple stone building, is the only truly permanent and impressive structure you will ever enter. It is the center of the village's social and spiritual life. On Sunday, you go to Mass. You do not go because you are filled with a serene sense of contemplative faith. You go because you are required to. To miss Mass is a sin and an offense punishable in the manorial court. You stand on the cold stone floor for the service. You do not understand the Latin the priest chants. It is a holy, magical language. Your religious experience is one of the senses: the smell of the incense, the sight of the painted wooden crucifix, the sound of the Sanctus bell. The priest will deliver a sermon in English, and it is here your worldview is shaped. He speaks of heaven and hell. Hell is described in vivid, terrifying detail: flames, demons with pitchforks, eternal torment. It is a very real place to you. He speaks of the great chain of being, God's divine order. The king is at the top, then the great lords, then the knights, then the freemen, and at the bottom, you. The serf. Your place in the world is not an accident of birth, it is God's will. To challenge it, to even resent it, is to challenge God himself. It is a powerful tool of social control, and it works. For the most part, you accept your lot, because the alternative is eternal damnation. But your spiritual life is a hybrid. Alongside the Christian God, there is the older, darker world of folk belief. You believe in the power of relics, the healing touch of a saint's bone. But you also believe in fairies, or the good folk, who can steal babies and sour milk. You believe in spirits of the rivers and woods. You know which herbs can cure a fever and which can be used to cast a love spell. You will say a prayer to St. Giles for protection, but you will also leave a bowl of milk on your doorstep at night to appease the household sprites. The priest preaches against these pagan superstitions, but he knows he cannot stamp them out. They are as much a part of the soil as the crops you grow. This blend of faith and folklore is your shield against a world you do not understand. Why did your child die of a fever? It was God's will. Or perhaps it was a curse from old Meg, the woman at the edge of the village who keeps to herself and mutters. Why did the crops fail? You have sinned and angered God. Or perhaps you failed to perform the correct ritual at planting time to ensure the fertility of the earth. These beliefs provide a framework, a sense of cause and effect in a life that is otherwise terrifyingly random and cruel. They give you a semblance of agency, even if it is just the agency to pray or perform a superstitious rite. In this world lit only by fire and faith, you are never truly alone, yet you are profoundly isolated. You are surrounded by your family, your neighbors, your lord's reeve, your priest, and a host of invisible spirits. But your understanding of the world is limited to the horizon you can see from the top of the nearest hill. And something is coming from beyond that horizon. Something you have no prayer, no ritual, and no belief to protect you from. There is a period in the year that you dread more than any other. It has a name. In later centuries, it will be called the Hungry Gap. For you, it is simply late winter and early spring. It is the lean season. The harvest of last autumn, which seemed so bountiful at the time, has been steadily dwindling. Imagine your store of grain. It is not in a great silo, but in sacks or a wooden bin inside your hovel. You have watched its level sink lower and lower with each passing week. A significant portion of it was never yours to begin with. The first share went to the church as a tithe, 1/10 of your gross product, a non-negotiable holy tax. The next, and often larger, share went to the Lord as rent and various dues. What remains is for your family and for seed grain, which you must save for the spring planting, no matter how hungry you are. To eat the seed grain is to condemn yourself to starvation the following year. It is the ultimate act of desperation. By February, the situation is precarious. The pottage is thinner now, more water than grain. The bread is gone. You are eating coarse cakes made from peas or beans, if you have them. The last of the salted meat was finished weeks ago. The cow, if you are fortunate enough to own one, has gone dry and will not give milk again until she calves in the spring. Hunger is now a permanent resident in your hut. It is a dull, constant ache in your belly. It makes you weak, irritable, and slow-witted. Your children, who were once boisterous, are now quiet and listless. Their thin faces and hollow eyes are a silent reproach. You see your wife growing gaunter, her movements slower. The cold is worse when you are hungry. It seeps into your bones and seems to settle there. Now, your life becomes a desperate hunt for calories. You, your wife, and your children will spend hours foraging in the bare woods. You are searching for anything edible, last year's withered acorns, which must be leached of their bitter tannins by soaking them in the stream, tough roots you can dig from the frozen ground, maybe even tree bark to boil into a desperate, nutrient-poor soup. You are a walking encyclopedia of wild pseudo-foods, knowledge passed down through generations of the hungry. This foraging is technically illegal. The woods belong to the Lord. To take anything from them is poaching. But the reeve and the Lord's foresters often turn a blind eye during the lean season, as long as you are not taking wood and certainly not game. A starving populace is an unproductive and potentially rebellious one. It is a delicate balance. Sometimes you get lucky. You might find a patch of wild garlic or early nettles, which you will boil into the pottage, a welcome flush of green flavor and faint nutrition. But the competition is fierce. The entire village is out there, scouring the same woods and fields. This period strains the fabric of the community. The communal spirit of the harvest gives way to a guarded suspicion. Did your neighbor find a hidden store of nuts and not share the knowledge? Is his family faring better than yours? The bonds of kinship and friendship are tested by the primal, selfish need to feed your own. Theft becomes more common. A chicken disappears from its roost in the night. A sack of beans goes missing. The manorial court sees more of these desperate, hungry crimes. The lean season is when you are most vulnerable to disease. Your weakened body, suffering from what we would now call malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies, has little resistance to the sicknesses that are a constant feature of your world. A simple cough can turn into a fatal lung infection. A small cut on your hand from a tool can become infected, swell with pus, and lead to a raging fever, a condition for which there is no cure beyond prayer and useless herbal poultices. You have seen strong men laid low by such things. You live with the daily, intimate knowledge of your own body's fragility. And what if the previous harvest was not just average, but poor? What if there was too much rain in the summer, causing the grain to rot on the stalk? Then the lean season becomes a season of famine. This is a different beast entirely. This is not just hunger, it is starvation. In a famine year, the village begins to consume itself. People sell their tools for a handful of grain. They sell their livestock. Then they sell their land, their tenancy rights, to a richer peasant for a pittance, condemning their children to a future as landless laborers. Some simply abandon their homes in the dead of night, becoming wandering beggars, a fate almost worse than death, as to be without a village, without a lord, is to be without a place in the world. You see death. The old and the very young are the first to go. Their passing is met with a grim, sorrowful resignation. The priest presides over the burials, his sermons on God's mysterious plan offering little comfort to a mother burying her emaciated child. The sheer injustice of it all is starkly visible. While you boil roots, you know that in the Lord's manor house, or in the nearby monastery, there are storehouses full of grain. You can smell the baking of fine bread, the roasting of meat. The gulf between your existence and theirs is not just one of wealth, but of survival itself. This is the bedrock of the resentment that simmers beneath the surface of your obedience. You may believe that this is God's order, but there are moments, in the dead of a hungry night, when you harbor a kernel of doubt, a dangerous spark of rage against the sheer unfairness of a world that allows a man to feast while your children starve. But you push the thought away. It is dangerous. Instead, you focus on survival. You chew the tough, tasteless food. You save the seed grain. And you watch the sky, praying for the first signs of true spring, for the thaw, for the moment you can finally push a plow into the soil and begin the cycle all over again, hoping, always hoping, that this year will be better. Life, for all its brutality, has a rhythm. It is a harsh, demanding rhythm, but it is a familiar one. The seasons turn, the work gets done, people are born, and people die. It is a cycle. But in the year of our Lord 1347, and then 1348, new stories begin to trickle into the isolated world of your village. They are just whispers at first, carried on the wind with traveling merchants, pilgrims, and mendicant friars. Imagine you are in the village alehouse one evening. It is not a pub as we would know it. It's simply a neighbor's hut, a woman who has brewed a larger batch of ale than usual and is selling the surplus. You are sitting on a rough bench in the smoky darkness, nursing a cup of the weak, cloudy brew. It is a rare moment of leisure. A peddler has stopped in the village for the night, a man whose face is lined from weather and 1,000 roads. He is the village's internet, their television, their newspaper. He brings news from the world beyond the hill. He speaks of trade, of the price of wool in Flanders, things that mean little to you. But then he lowers his voice. He talks of a great sickness. A pestilence of a kind no one has ever seen. He says it began in the east, in the lands of the Saracens and Tartars, a place as mythical to you as the moon. He says it travels on the merchant ships, the great cogs that ply the sea routes. He heard in a port town that it had arrived in Italy. He describes it in horrifying terms. People would be struck with a sudden fever and great pains. Then, hard, black swellings, the size of an apple or an egg, would erupt in their groins and armpits. He calls them buboes. After the swellings, dark spots would appear all over the body. Death, he says, is swift and almost certain, coming in 2 or 3 days. The Italian doctors, the most learned in the world, were powerless. You and the other villagers listen, a mixture of fascination and fear. It sounds like a tale meant to frighten children, like a story of dragons or demons. Italy? The East? It is a world away. It has nothing to do with you, here in the muddy heart of England. You finish your ale, shake your head at the fantastical story, and go home. But the whispers do not stop. A few months later, a friar passes through, begging for his order. He preaches in the churchyard. His sermon is fire and brimstone. He speaks of the great pestilence that has now consumed the kingdom of France. He calls it the work of God, a divine scourge to punish mankind for its pride, its greed, its vanity. He describes cities where the dead are piled in the streets because there is no one left to bury them. He says the air itself is poisoned. He speaks of strange alignments of the planets, of earthquakes, and rains of frogs that heralded the coming doom. Now, the fear is no longer distant. France is just across the water. You have seen French traders. You drink French wine at feasts if the Lord is generous. The story is no longer a fantasy. It has crossed the sea. It is at the door. The village priest takes up the theme. His Sunday sermons become frantic, terrifying affairs. He exhorts you to confess your sins, to pray for deliverance. He leads the entire village in processions, walking barefoot around the fields, chanting litanies, whipping yourselves with branches to show your penitence, hoping to appease an angry God. You participate earnestly. You are terrified. The image of the black swellings, the buboes, haunts your thoughts. You start to look at outsiders with fear. When a stranger appears on the road, you do not greet them. You back away. You hide your children. Every traveler is a potential carrier of this invisible death. The world, which was already small, shrinks even further. The idea of going to the market town a few miles away now seems like a perilous journey into a contaminated land. The authorities, the distant lord and his council, react. Orders come down, read by the steward in the manorial court. They recommend prayers and processions. The king has ordered the bishops to lead the nation in prayer. Learned physicians in Oxford and Cambridge write treatises, which you will never see, debating the cause. Is it a miasma, a bad air, released by earthquakes? Is it the fault of the Jews, as some rumors from the continent suggest, though you have never met a Jewish person? Is it simply the wrath of God? No one knows. The lack of understanding is almost as terrifying as the disease itself. Then, one summer evening in 1348, a man from a coastal village stumbles into your alehouse. His eyes are wide with terror. He says it has come. The plague is in Dorset. It arrived on a ship in Melcombe Regis. He speaks of villages where half the people are dead in a fortnight. He says you can smell the death on the wind. The news falls like a stone in the smoky room. The whispers are no longer whispers. The story is no longer a story. The shadow that has been creeping across the map of the known world has finally fallen across your home. There is no more doubt. There is no more abstract fear of a distant problem. There is only the cold, hard certainty that it is here. And it is coming for you. You walk home that night, your heart a cold lump in your chest. You look at your wife, sleeping in the faint glow of the embers. You look at your children, their small forms huddled together for warmth. The familiar, comforting sounds of your hovel, the breathing, the shifting of the ox, now sound fragile, temporary. You lie down on your straw bed, but you do not sleep. You stare into the oppressive darkness and you listen, as if you could hear the footsteps of the plague marching down the road towards your village. The waiting is a unique form of torture. For weeks, life goes on, but it is a hollow imitation of what it once was. Every sunrise feels like a reprieve and a threat. The harvest must still be brought in, the animals tended. But a pall of dread hangs over everything. You work in the fields, but you find yourselves stopping to listen, as if you could hear its approach. The village becomes unnaturally quiet. The usual banter and arguments fade, replaced by watchful eyes and murmured prayers. Then, it happens. It starts with the blacksmith's wife. She is a strong, robust woman, always quick with a joke. One afternoon, she complains of a piercing headache and a great weariness. She goes to lie down. By evening, she is burning with a fever that makes her shiver so violently the bed frame rattles. Her husband tries to make her drink water, but she cannot keep it down. She begins to rave, speaking of things that make no sense. The next morning, the village priest is called. He is a man you have known your whole life, a man whose authority you have always accepted. But when he enters the blacksmith's hovel, you see the fear in his eyes. He is as lost as you are. He says the prayers for the sick, sprinkles holy water. It has no effect. Later that day, the blacksmith comes out of his hut, his face ashen. He speaks to the reeve in a choked whisper. He found it. The sign. The token. A hard swelling, the size of a new potato, in his wife's groin. The bubo. The word spreads through the village like fire through dry thatch. The pestilence is here. A primal, animal terror grips Wexbury. The thin veneer of community, already strained by years of hardship, shatters. Neighbor turns from neighbor. The blacksmith's hut is now an island of death. No one will go near it. People who walked by it yesterday now cross to the other side of the lane, holding cloths over their faces. The blacksmith is left to tend to his dying wife alone, a man already treated as if he, too, is dead. She dies 2 days later. Her screams, which had echoed through the village, finally fall silent. The problem of her burial now arises. No one will touch the body. The normal rituals of washing and wrapping the deceased are abandoned. The blacksmith, half mad with grief and terror, has to drag his wife's body, wrapped in its blanket, out of the hut himself. A shallow grave is dug in the churchyard, far from the other tombs. The priest says the final rites from a safe distance, his voice trembling. The sound of the first shovelful of earth hitting the wrapped body is a sound of final, horrifying damnation. Then, the blacksmith falls ill. The exact same symptoms. The fever, the pain, the delirium. He is dead in 3 days. Now his children are orphans, trapped in a house of plague, and no one will go to them. The disease does not move through the village in an orderly fashion. It leaps. The weaver at the far end of the village, who had no contact with the blacksmith, is the next to die. Then 2 children from another family. It is inexplicable, magical in its malevolence. It feels like an intelligent entity, a black visitor walking unseen through your lanes, touching one person here, another there, at random. Your own hovel becomes your fortress and your prison. You bar the door. You forbid your children from going outside. You have your small store of grain, your water. You will try to wait it out. But the outside world intrudes. You hear the sounds. The church bell, which at first tolled for each death, now tolls almost constantly, a maddening, incessant dirge, until the man who rings it, the sexton, himself falls sick, and the bell falls silent. The silence that follows is even more terrifying. You hear the wailing from a neighboring hut as a mother realizes her child is burning with fever. You hear the delirious shouts of a man in the grip of the agony. You smell it. The sweet, cloying odor of sickness and, eventually, of decomposition, as bodies are left inside huts for days before a desperate family member or a brave priest can arrange a hasty burial. One morning, your youngest daughter complains of a headache. The world stops. You and your wife look at each other, a silent, sickening understanding passing between you. You feel her forehead. It is hot. You tell yourself it is a normal fever. A summer sickness. It cannot be the sickness. Not your child. But by midday, she is shivering. By nightfall, she is rambling, her eyes wide and unseeing. You sit with her, your wife bathing her face with a cool cloth, a hopeless, desperate gesture. You pray. You have never prayed so hard in your life. You pray to God, to the Virgin Mary, to every saint whose name you know. You even mutter a charm to the old spirits of the hearth, a pagan plea you would have been terrified to voice a month ago. You will do anything. You will promise anything. In the middle of the night, your wife is changing the child's soiled linens when she lets out a small, strangled gasp. You rush to her side. She points, her hand trembling, to the child's neck, just under her jawline. There, small but firm and unmistakable, is the lump. The token. The bubo. There is no rational thought now. Only a vast, black ocean of grief and terror. This is not God's will. This is a cruel, malicious demon that has entered your home and claimed your daughter. Your wife begins to sob, a raw, animal sound of pure anguish. You hold her, your own body shaking uncontrollably, your mind refusing to accept what your eyes are seeing. You do not abandon her. You are her father. You will not leave her side. You hold her small, hot hand. You listen to her ragged breathing. You try to coax a few drops of water past her lips. You witness the full, horrific progression of the disease. The dark spots, the black tokens that give the death its name, begin to bloom across her skin. You watch the life slowly, cruelly, and painfully flicker out of your own child. She dies just before dawn on the third day. The silence she leaves behind is a physical presence. A weight. A void. Your hovel, which was a sanctuary, is now a tomb. You and your wife sit there, in the gloom, next to the small, still body of your child, shattered. The world outside, with its own dying and its own grief, has ceased to exist. There is only this room, and this small, perfect body that is now just a vessel of the pestilence. The brutal life of a serf, with its toil and its hunger, now seems like a paradise compared to this. This is a brutality of the soul, a sorrow so profound it hollows you out, leaving nothing behind but a shell. The death of your daughter breaks something inside you. But the world does not allow you the luxury of private grief. The practical, horrifying problem of her body must be dealt with. The fear of contagion is now stronger than any tie of community or friendship. You must do it yourselves. You and your wife wrap her small form in her blanket. You cannot bring yourself to dig a grave in the overflowing churchyard, now a place of nightmares. Instead, You carry her to the small strip of land you cultivate, your family's land, and you dig a grave in the earth she would have one day worked. You lay her in the ground. There is no priest, no prayers, no ceremony. Just the two of you, under a gray, indifferent sky, burying your own child. It is the most unnatural act you can imagine. As you shovel the earth back into the hole, you feel as though you are burying a part of your own soul with her. When you return to the village, you see the fabric of your world completely undone. The structure of power has crumbled. The Reeve, the man whose scowl could make you tremble, is dead. He died early on, struck down in his own fine cottage. His authority died with him. There is no one to organize the work days on the Lord's domain. And who would work them anyway? The Lord's fields lie fallow, choked with weeds. The harvest is rotting on the stalk. The very idea of labor rent, of working for a distant master, seems like a joke from a forgotten world. Who cares about the Lord's profit when your family is dying? The manorial court has not met in weeks. The steward would not dare come to Wexbury now. There are no fines, no punishments. The carefully constructed system of control has evaporated, replaced by the simple, brutal law of survival. The priest is a broken man. He has watched half his flock die. He has buried dozens, then scores of people, until he could no longer keep up. He still says Mass in the church, but only a handful of terrified souls attend. His sermons about God's plan now sound hollow, even to him. He has no answers. He tried. He walked among the sick, offering what comfort he could, until he, too, fell ill. He survives, but the plague leaves him weakened, his faith shattered. He looks at his crucifix and sees not a symbol of salvation, but a monument to a God who abandoned them. The bonds of family, the strongest ties you knew, are fraying and snapping all around you. You see a man barring the door of his hut on his own wife after she shows the first sign of fever. You hear of children who have fled their homes, leaving their sick parents to die alone. You also see acts of incredible love and sacrifice, a mother who tends to her son, knowing it will mean her own death, and it does. But the fear is a powerful acid, dissolving everything it touches. The village alehouse is shuttered. There is no laughter, no gossip. The only gatherings are for burials. At first, they were individual affairs. Then, as the death toll mounted, they became mass burials. A great pit was dug in the churchyard. The bodies, unceremoniously wrapped in shrouds or blankets, are brought on carts and tipped in, a tangle of limbs. There is no time for individual rights. It is a production line of death. Your own family is an island. You, your wife, and your 2 remaining sons. You guard them with a fierce, paranoid vigilance. You survive on what you have stored. You do not leave the hut. You speak to no one. Every day is a gamble. Every morning you wake up and perform a terrifying ritual. You check yourself, your wife, your sons, for any sign. A headache. A feeling of warmth. A pain in the joints. Each morning that you are all still healthy feels like a miracle, a temporary stay of execution. The plague, in its own horrifying way, is a great leveler. It does not distinguish between the reeve and the cottager, the prosperous peasant and the landless laborer. It takes who it will. Old and young, strong and weak. It has torn through the village and ripped apart the very idea of a place in society. There is no great chain of being in the plague pit. There is only the dead. You lose track of time. Days blur into a monotonous cycle of fear and waiting. The summer peaks and begins to fade. The number of new sick seems to lessen. The wailing from the huts becomes less frequent. The air, which had been thick with the smell of death, begins to clear, washed by the autumn rains. Slowly, tentatively, the survivors begin to emerge. One day, you open the door of your hut and step outside. You have not done this for more than a few moments in what feels like a lifetime. The first thing that strikes you is the silence. It is not a peaceful silence. It is a heavy, unnatural quiet. The village was never loud, but it always had a hum of life, the sound of children playing, the blacksmith's hammer, the lowing of cattle, the distant shouts of men working in the fields. All of that is gone. The only sound is the wind whistling around the corners of the empty hovels. You walk through the village. It is a ghost town. Doors hang open, swinging on leather hinges. Weeds are already growing thick in the lanes. You pass the weaver's cottage. It is silent. The loom, visible through the doorway, is threaded with a half-finished piece of cloth, coated in dust. He and his entire family are gone. You pass the blacksmith's forge. The fire is cold, the tools rusting on the bench. Gone. You pass hut after hut. Empty. Silent. You walk to the edge of the village and look out over the great open fields. It is a scene of utter desolation. The Lord's domain is a sea of weeds. Your own strips of land, and your neighbors, are a ruin. The wheat, the precious grain you had all worked so hard to cultivate, has long since ripened, fallen, and rotted where it lay. The harvest never happened. It is an entire year's worth of wealth and sustenance, gone. A catastrophe on top of a catastrophe. You see animals wandering freely. An ox, its ribs showing, munches on the weeds in what was once a neighbor's vegetable patch. A flock of sheep, their wool long and matted, wander aimlessly without a shepherd. Their owners are all dead. The living are too few and too broken to care for them. You go to the church. The door is ajar. Inside, it is cold and damp. The priest is there, sitting on a bench, staring at the altar. He looks like an old man, though he is not yet 40. He does not even look up as you enter. You try to take stock. You walk from one end of the village to the other, counting. Who is left? There is you and your family. There is the old woman, Meg, who somehow survived, reinforcing her reputation as someone otherworldly. There are a few other families, mostly those who, like you, barricaded themselves inside their homes. You count maybe 40 people. Before the plague, Wexbury had a population of nearly 200. For out of every 5 people you have ever known are dead. Let that sink in. This is not a statistic. This is your brother-in-law. This is the woman who helped your wife give birth. This is the boy your son used to play with. This is the man you shared a plow with. Every face you see is a reminder of 10 faces you will never see again. The village is not just empty. It is haunted. Every silent hut holds the ghosts of a family. The survivors gather in the churchyard, not for a service, but because it is the only place to meet. You look at each other. You are all that is left. The old hierarchies, the petty squabbles and jealousies, they seem meaningless now. You are not the Reeves men, or the Lord's serfs. You are simply the survivors of Wexbury. There is a new, strange bond between you, a bond forged in shared trauma and loss. The immediate problem is overwhelming. Winter is coming. The harvest is lost. There is almost no food. The survivors pull what little they have. The wandering livestock is rounded up. It is not property anymore, not really. It is a communal resource. The dead have no need for it. An ox that belonged to your dead neighbor is now used by another survivor to plow a small patch of land for a late, desperate crop. No one asks for the Lord's permission. The Lord is an abstract concept from a dead world. This is the great silence. The silence of the dead. The silence of the abandoned fields. The silence of a social order that has been shattered. You have survived the pestilence itself. Now you must survive its aftermath. You are standing in the ruins of your world, and you have to decide what to do next. The old rules are gone. The old bonds are broken. Everything is about to change. The winter that follows the great pestilence is the hardest you have ever known. It is a hungry, grim season lived in the shadow of the dead. But you survive. The small community of survivors clings together, sharing resources, finding a strength in their shared loss. When spring arrives, it feels different. It is not just the promise of renewal, it is the dawn of a new and utterly unforeseen reality. The sheer scale of the death has broken the engine of the old world. And that engine was built on one thing, a vast supply of cheap, immobile labor. It was built on you. One day, the steward arrives. The Lord's agent, the man from the world outside. He rides into the village, his face a mask of disbelief as he surveys the desolation, the empty huts, the weed-choked fields. He has come to collect the rents and organize the work for the Lord's domain. He finds a village that cannot pay and will not work. He summons the survivors, you among them. He begins to speak in the old way, demanding the labor rents, the fines, the dues. And then something remarkable happens. A man named Godfrey, a simple farmer who was no one of importance before the plague, steps forward. He says, simply, no. The steward is stunned into silence. Godfrey continues. He says they will not work the Lord's land for free. Not anymore. There are too few of them, and too much work to do on their own land simply to survive. He says if the Lord wants his fields plowed, he will have to pay for it. In cash. Good silver pennies. It is a moment of quiet, earth-shattering revolution. Before the plague, such a demand would have been unthinkable, an act of rebellion to be crushed. But what can the steward do now? Flog them all? Imprison them? There are no replacements. The neighboring villages are just as empty. Labor, which was once the cheapest commodity, is now the most precious thing in the world. You and the other survivors hold all the cards. The steward, after blustering and threatening, has no choice but to agree to negotiate. He needs the Lord's land worked, and you are the only ones left to do it. For the first time in your life, you are not a supplicant. You are a bargainer. You are selling your labor, not giving it as an obligation. This same scene is being repeated in 1,000 other villages across England. The old bonds of serfdom are dissolving, not by law or proclamation, but by the raw, simple arithmetic of death. Land is now plentiful, and labours are scarce. A few years pass. The world is still a wounded, emptier place, but it is a world of opportunity for those who survived. Lords are desperate for tenants. They offer better terms. Lower rents. Fixed cash rents instead of the hated labor service. Some lords even try to force the old ways, to pass laws freezing wages and binding men to the soil, but it's like trying to rebuild a dam with sand. Men and women simply walk away. You hear stories of serfs abandoning their ancestral villages and traveling to another manor where a lord is offering better pay and more freedom. The merchant fine for marrying your daughter off? It's a joke now. Lords are happy to have anyone settle on their land. There's Harriet, the death tax of your best beast. Many lords suspend it, desperate to keep families on their holdings. You are no longer bound to the land. You are still poor. Life is still hard. But you are not a serf in the old way. You have a freedom of movement, an economic leverage you could not have dreamed of before the black visitor arrived. You can sell your surplus produce at the market for cash. You can save. Your surviving sons will not be nativi, the born ones, tied to the soil. They will be farmers, laborious, perhaps even artisans. Their horizons are wider than yours ever were. You are an old man now. You sit outside your hut, a better, larger hut you built yourself with timber from the Lord's wood, which no one patrols anymore. You watch your grandson playing in the lane. You have lived through the end of a world. The brutality of your early life, the back-breaking toil, the hunger, the casual cruelty of the system seems like a distant memory, a story from another age. It was replaced by the acute, apocalyptic brutality of the plague, a horror that wiped the slate clean. You are left with a profound and difficult understanding. The new world, with its fragile freedoms, was born from the graves of your friends, your neighbors, your own child. Her death, and the deaths of millions like her, was the terrible, unthinkable price paid for the breaking of the old chains. There is no justice in it. There is no divine plan. It is simply the chaotic, cruel, and transformative way of history. The world you will leave behind is emptier, quieter, and haunted by ghosts. But it is also, for those who remain, a world a little more free. Music, the melancholic drone returns, but now it has a slightly more hopeful, rising tone underneath it. It swells softly and then fades to silence. Concluding reflection. Host, the story of a medieval serf, particularly one who lived through the Black Death, is a journey into an almost alien world, governed by rules and fears we can barely comprehend. The brutality wasn't just in the violence or the poverty, but in the utter lack of agency, the sense of being a cog in a machine you could neither understand nor escape. Life was a relentless cycle of labor, governed by the sun and a distant, unseen lord. And yet, the cataclysm of the plague, the single greatest disaster to befall medieval Europe, contained a bitter and transformative irony. By destroying the population, it destroyed the very foundation of the feudal system. It gave the survivors, the broken, grieving few, an unforeseen power. The great silence left by the dead allowed the living to finally speak, to make demands, and to begin the slow, painful process of building a new world from the ruins of the old. It's a stark reminder that history is not a neat progression. It's often chaotic, brutal, and deeply unfair. But it also shows the profound resilience of ordinary people, their ability to endure the unthinkable, and to find a way to rebuild, to hope, and to continue, even when their world has been burned to the ground. Their names are lost to us, but their legacy is in the very foundations of the world that followed.